Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of What's the Nerd. This week, me and Leighton are going to talk about The Last of Us Season 2, our likes, our dislikes, overall thoughts on the season as a whole, and our hopes for Season 3. Leighton, I want you to start us off just with some things you think the show did really well this season.
Yeah, before I get into that, I just want to let everyone know this will be a spoiler-filled episode. Just in case you haven't had the chance to complete the series, I'd go back, watch it, and then listen to the podcast. Things that I thought were really good this season. Again, I think the set pieces like the first season were really, really great, and they stepped it up. I think they probably had a larger budget. Beautiful. I think it looks great. I thought that they continued to portray Joel very, really well. As far as like Pedro Pascal really has the mannerisms down, the tone of Joel, his love for Ellie really shines. I mean, he feels like a real person. I think that's cool. I also like that they explored him kind of going to therapy and it kind of being not only for himself but for his relationship with Ellie. You don't really get that in the games, so that was a nice touch. And I know they were probably just trying to milk, Pedro Pascal as much as they could this season before they, kill him off. But I thought that was great. Some other things that were good. Uh, they, I was worried that they were going to have a lot of filler. Kind of like the first season, it did follow the first game, but it had some like extra episodes that just added context to the greater narrative, and they were great. But I was like, is that how they're going to drag out these next couple seasons? Right? Like, are we going to get a lot of the story from the second game, or is it going to be like the first quarter of it, and then we're going to get that bit by bit? And I do feel like they've progressed a little faster than they thought they would. Um, but I also am kind of upset with how they handled a few things. Like, um, although they touched on a lot of key moments from Ellie's side of gameplay, the first 3 days in Seattle, or really the only 3 days in Seattle, all from Ellie's perspective, and then leading up to all this stuff in Jackson, they hit on like every pivotal moment from the game, but they did it in a way that was almost just like fan servicey, right? Like they did the bookshop guitar scene, and they did Joel's death, and they did the New Year's Eve party and kiss, and they did the weed smoking. They did like a lot of great things. They did the subway encounter with the infected. I know I'm kind of blasting through these, but these are just like notable moments from the game that I enjoyed, especially from that first half. Um, and they touch on it, and they even touch on the Seraphites and the different factions, WLF. And like I like that they did all of that, but the way they did it was almost so heartless and without the context of some other plot elements, and also like because a video game gives you so much time with a character and to be in those environments, it almost feels like these story-driven narrative beats from video games pay off more because you're like, oh my God, I've spent so much time with these characters with NPC dialogue that when there's certain moments in gameplay cutscenes, it feels more earned. Whereas this is like, okay, we have to hit this point, and this point, and there's so much jumping around on like a time uh kind of scale
Constraint.
constraint even, yeah, because especially like the fact that we only get 7 episodes to handle Ellie's story, it just feels off, right? You know what I'm saying? Like it just doesn't. It's like all of the ingredients for the recipe were there, but somewhere along the line they messed up in like putting them together, I think.
And honestly, I agree with you on a lot of points. Particularly, I thought the set pieces were absolutely incredible and beautiful. Um, the little touches they did with the infected, especially in Jackson, adding the kind of frostbitten, frozen aspect to it was really cool. Um, I will say, as far as the first two episodes go of almost any season of any show, like it had me gripped and like fully in and totally invested and pumped week for those next weeks. And I think it was one of the better starts to a season two I've seen in any show ever.
1000%. I
I
literally
think they
remember
did a
when.
really
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just remember, to your point, when I watched episode two, I was like, oh my God, that was better than 90% of season finales I've seen or series finales for most any show I've ever seen.
without a shadow of a doubt.
So it's like they came out hot, dude.
And on top of that, something else I do want to add there is I thought it was a really nice touch to add that fight of them defending Jackson.
Yeah,
One, because it creates more of a cohesive narrative for the episode. So it doesn't feel like you're dragging out, you know, Joel's death or anything along
right.
those lines. But you're also creating extra depth where you're creating an extra level of panic and fight and survival for the town itself.
Yes.
And I think that's really cool that while Joel is being murdered, Jackson's also fighting for its life. So there wasn't the option to go and find Joel and Ellie and Jesse and all that whole group.
Right.
So I thought that was a nice touch to create like these life or death circumstances for both, and seeing one turn out okay and one turn out in this like incredible emotional scene that I'll say I didn't think they were going to nail. Like just being very pessimistic. I'm
I
like,
didn't know how
I
they
don't
would
know if,
either. Yeah.
and I thought they did a pretty good job. And kind of like you touched on, like they hit a lot of the big pivotal, like emotional moments.
Right.
And I thought in every scene they did that with, it was done beautifully. It was really like captivating,
Yeah. Like the
but it
acting
did
was
feel
great,
like
the
there,
light, the cinematography was great, but something just like wasn't
it felt
there.
like something was missing.
Yeah.
And kind of to go into a few things I really didn't love, the main thing was, and this is going to sound kind of cheesy, but I think the episode count was an issue.
I
I
agree.
feel like you could have done an 8 or 9 episode season and included a little more context in certain areas that would have made the entire season an absolute home run.
Yeah.
Like it did feel like they were kind of just going from like story beat moment to story beat moment without like any in between really that did much
Yes.
once you got past episode 2.
Yes.
Um, like you said, like I thought the train car sequence that was incredible. You know, it kind of showed the might and how much of WLF there was, as well as the level of infected there were. And I thought that was a really cool survival moment and kind of coming together and Dina and Ellie finally expressing their feelings for one another with Ellie being bit. Like I thought that was all done very well.
Hmm.
And yes, there's plenty of memes from that episode as well, which
Sure.
it is what it is. There were some
Right.
kind of goofy moments,
Yeah.
but I thought up until episode 3, I was really invested. And I feel personally where they lost me was you see it in the first episode. At this point, Ellie is seasoned. Her and Dina can take out clickers, no problem, multiple clickers. Like,
They're
and
almost
you
like
even,
treating it like a joke on their first patrol, right? It's like they don't look like they're
it's a
trying, and
cakewalk.
yeah, exactly. And you're like, okay, well, if this is them like kind of just like hanging out doing routine work in Jackson, what's it gonna be like when they're in
When
Seattle?
they're on their revenge tour.
Yeah.
And I feel like the big thing you're missing in all of those sequences in Seattle is outside of a couple extremely quick, like glancing moments, you never see Ellie and Dina actually do anything badass except for run. And I
I
understand
know.
that's a big part of the game too, but like to never show like there's never really any revenge that happens except for
Yeah.
near the latter half of the season. And one of them is intentional when Ellie kills Nora. That's a pretty epic sequence.
Right.
But the other, when she encounters Abby's 2 other friends in the aquarium, is essentially accidental that she kills them both. So, like,
Yes.
the only moment you have where you're like, oh shit, like this is happening is with Ellie and Nora. And
Yeah.
outside of that, there's no context, there's no fights. And like, I know this might just sound like a cheesy, like, why wasn't there enough action take? But it's a big part of the game. And it just felt like it was completely missing after episode 3.
Yeah. So I want to go to 2 points that you hit on. I want to go back to the first point of the attack on Jackson, and then I want to come back and talk about everything you talked about with the encounters and the lack of action, right? So the first thing with the town of Jackson, the other thing I really liked and that you hit on was it shows also the resilience of the town of Jackson and shows that like these are hard individuals. You know, we get to see a lot of Joel and Ellie and Tommy and Jesse. And they're supposed to be cool, right? They are like always on patrol. They're like your soldiers, right? They're your military. They're whatever, your police force. And so you expect them to be able to handle themselves. But for the most part, yeah, they had to kill a few that got bit in Jackson. And there were a lot that were injured, but like everyone was giving their all. And I just thought it was really cool to see because you don't really get to see that. You see Jackson as this nice, quaint, sweet little town, really, when you're walking through, especially in the opening sequence of the game. So I like you said, I think that really added to the community and making you feel like you were there and that it's lived in, rather than just focusing on these larger than life characters. I thought that was great. I thought also the pacing of that episode was fantastic. It's like we talked about how it seems like there's a lot of time jumps and they kind of just get pivotal moment to pivotal moment to pivotal moment without all this stuff in between. In this episode, not only do you see the introduction of Abby's character, you get that whole beautiful sequence of her falling down the hill, discovering the infected. You know that they like respond on noise. You get a horde of them. It's ripped straight out of the game. And even the first episode was pretty faithful to the video game, which is awesome. Um, but they also progressed. Like they did that whole encounter, then they did the encounter with Ellie on patrol. Then they did then they did the actual death scene. It's like they did a lot of story and gameplay in that episode, and they did it in a way that it flowed nicely, but also gave you just enough of each where you're like, oh my gosh, like this is faithful and it's giving the viewer time to let it all sink in and let you form opinions about these characters too. It was very, very visceral, and I really thought like that was the pace we were going to get. Like when they set off to Seattle in the next episode, I thought not only were we going to get some of the walk there, because like in the video game, it kind of just shows them getting to Seattle on Shimmer, right? But you see them going through all the wreckage. You see them kind of exploring the outskirts of Seattle. They have encounters with infected. There's some elements of you walking through a town and finding little things in the town and learning more about the story. Like I really wanted more exploration in that episode that we really didn't get, and I wanted to see, like you said, more action, which brings me to that next point. And I don't know if it's. I would hate to say Craig Mazin, who's I believe is director of the game and the TV show, or at least helped create and produce, understands why the audience loves the source material, but it almost makes me feel like they don't because, like, yes, the story is loved. And although it was controversial when it released because Joel was being taken out in the very opening hours of the video game, but the reason that the story hits so hard is because you as the player in game one as Joel and Ellie in some portions, and mainly game two as Ellie, who doesn't have her pseudo father figure with her anymore, has to step up, has to be able to protect herself. She's also trying to figure out who she is. She's going on revenge for this person who she feels like betrayed her, but also took care of her when she couldn't. She's upset that she didn't get to fulfill her greater purpose by becoming a cure, but also grateful that she was saved. And so it's like you have all these emotions and you feel it through the brutality of the gameplay, but also the resilience of you're taking on armies of trained soldiers, hordes of infected, and sadistic seraphites, and sometimes at the same time. I don't get a sense at all in this show of this version of Ellie doing any of that.
No, not even a little bit. And also, something that I thought was kind of interesting, like you get aspects of the Seraphites, like you get that scene where they humanize them early on, and you can tell that the WLF came through and killed them all,
Right.
and then you get the scene of the torture, and you kind of see how like they're almost cultish like beliefs and behavior has like twisted the way they are, and you see some messed up moments with the Seraphites, but it's all kind of in the background. Like Ellie never really has a real interaction with them
No.
other than when she's captured and let go immediately. So like,
Which didn't
or when
happen in the
Dina
game.
gets injured,
Not like that. Like
which like Dina getting injured, like that moment hit hard. They had to leave. She ended up tracking down Nora. Like that all made sense and like worked well. But like you just said, like there's really never encounters after the initial. And don't get me wrong, that stalker sequence was super cool. But like outside of that, it's just like it's like you said, like there's not that payoff like they actually did anything the whole time they were there. It's
Right.
kind of like these almost purely accidental moments where something pivotal happens. And it's not that there's no context, there's just no like they're just like Ellie in the hospital. All of a sudden she's just in the hospital after after veering off. Like it's there's no like real build up to
Yeah,
anything.
at least show the exploration, show how it's hard to get through the terrain. Because, like, the other thing about this world is like, and they did a way better job in season one, is that this is the apocalypse, right? And so, like, it needs to feel like that. It feels like it's flaw. It's easy for them to traverse the landscape. That they're not really running into that many infected. Like for a show that literally the entire world collapsed due to the infected and the fungus of the cordyceps. It does not feel like that hardly at all. In fact, I have to be reminded that I'm watching a show about zombies every like 3 episodes when one shows up. You know what I mean? Um, the other thing is like to your point with the Seraphites, it again the way they do it, like you said, like they introduce them and they kind of show like there's some spirituality to their beliefs and they feel like they're doing sacrifice for their deity and whatever, right? And they were chosen and all of these things, but the way they do it feels like they were like, oh yeah, people liked this little faction in the game. We had a lot of backstory for them. We don't really have the time to put that into the show, so we're just gonna like, make sure there's like a scene in this episode and a scene later on. That way, it feels like you've been following them throughout the entirety of the season, and it just doesn't work when you do it that way.
And like you include some of their sadistic nature in like the set pieces. And like we said, the set pieces are a strong point throughout the whole season.
Yeah,
Like when Ellie and Dina go into the radio station and you see the WLF, members who are disemboweled and all that. And it's like I like in your head, you're like, I need to learn more and see this faction in action, especially because you see the background fighting when Ellie and Dina are keeping track of things, and it looks like there's a full scale war going on between these two factions, and you
yeah.
never see anything
You never
about it.
see any of it, right?
And I'm going to use an analogy here, and a lot of people might think I'm being a little too much. And I understand there's more seasons to come, but it almost feels a little final season of Game of Thrones esque, where
Right,
it's like, oh well, sorry, we couldn't include that. We didn't have enough episodes. It's like, well, why? Why
right,
didn't you get
right.
more? The first season was an incredible success. And how many episodes was that? 8?
I want to say it was nine. It might have been eight, but nine.
But
I mean, I thought it was like fairly long.
But that's my point too. Season 1 got 8 or 9 episodes at least.
Yeah.
Season 2, they're like, we're just going to cut it at 7. It's like, why would you do that?
And the
Because
other
you
thing,
still could have ended it at the same point, which would have been totally fine. But you needed more in there, so it didn't feel like when episode 7 came. My thought was, oh yeah, well we got another episode before the season ends, and then I'm like, wait, no, we don't. What the hell?
right? Yeah, I remember telling you how was the season finale, and you're like, dude, that wasn't season finale. I was like, oh yeah, it was. I hadn't even seen it yet. The other thing is like, people may argue, okay, well, season one had some time jumps. It had some skipping around through, intense moments in the game. But at the same time, like, we're talking about a game from 2013, and it's like, okay, the story moments of that game, though, they were fleshed out pretty well. And in fact, I don't think that the quote unquote filler episodes of season one were filler just because like they they needed more to talk about. I think it like truly did add to to the story overall and to let you feel like that world was more lived in. But
That's
like
exactly the term I would have used.
but
Yeah.
like in this season, the quote unquote slow or filler episodes, like we almost needed just more of that to really push the plot further. If you're not going to give me action, give me really rich storytelling. And instead they were like, "Hey, we don't have like the time or the budget to give you huge action set pieces, which is a lot of the game." Like unfortunately, like yeah, again, I know I probably sound like a broken record, but this is like really pivotal to understand what fans, or at least what I feel like the community loves about these games. And it's like this game, although a very human story about survival and love, is also about brutality and combat, right? And how that's
In
also
a
raw
very
human nature, because when your back is against the wall and you are in strict survival mode, sometimes you have to let the animal out. You know what I mean? And it also shows that. It shows that these people who were civilized for decades and decades, who had normal lives, who had careers, who had families, become completely different versions of themselves because they think there's no other way to get through life. And Ellie is an example of that too. Instead, she kind of grew up in this world, and she almost learns the opposite where she had a normal
she
family.
almost
She then has to go through the apocalypse. Then she lets it get to her after losing her father figure, becomes this angry, revenge seeking individual, but then realizes, oh my God, this is not what life's about, right? Once she kind of has her sunset moment with Dina at the end, which spoilers, for those of you who haven't played. Um, and that's what it's about. And it just like, it's really, really missing that. And it's jarring almost. It doesn't feel like I'm watching The Last of Us. It almost looks like if you said, if you put The Last of Us Part 2 into some AI platform and said, okay, now make this into a TV show, it feels like a half-baked you know what I mean?
well, and
Takes the
here's something I
important
want to
moments,
touch
but doesn't
on.
flesh them out.
There's two other things I want to touch on that I think are extremely important.
Hmm.
Number one is I thought Abby's portrayal was incredible.
Yes.
And yes, I understand a lot of people had their gripes about the physicality of the character because in the game, Abby is jacked.
She's a tank. And she's like,
But
she is scary, like from a presence perspective and like as a military leader, but she's also just effing scary, dude.
like there's a different physical presence in the game with her versus with Ellie.
Right.
But at the same time, what I think the portrayal nailed and actually did better than in the game was kind of her mental state being on edge and that
Yeah.
just pure, I do not care who gets hurt. I do not care what happens. We are getting revenge. We are killing Joel.
Yeah.
And I feel that brutality, that nastiness, that visceral nature that she brings is what Ellie is missing in the second half of the season.
1000%. Well,
And
and
like, yes, you have those soft moments in the game with her and Dina, but at the same time, you're missing that visceral, revenge filled, like, you get flashes of it, but
yeah.
not enough that it even makes sense. Like, when she kills Nora, you're like, where has this been the last two episodes? And then she's very remorseful afterward, and it's not that that doesn't happen in the game totally, but it's like
So
it it just seems like that visceral nature and that actual hunt for revenge that you're expecting out of Ellie just doesn't happen the
well,
way
and
you it should.
1000%. And the other thing is like that you're kind of flirting around with too, with the character of Ellie, and this is like my biggest gripe of the season. In fact, I posted on Twitter today, and it was like literally about my disappointment with the series because of the shoehorn pivotal moments, right, and the portrayal of Ellie. And I'm not talking about Bella Ramsey's casting. Okay, I don't really care. I don't care that she doesn't look like Ellie. I don't, whatever, right? Are there several actresses out there that looked more like the video game counterpart? Sure. But we could say that for like a lot of adaptations, right? I don't care about that. I care about, can she portray this character, right? And I don't know that even this portrayal was her fault. We have to think about directing of how they told her to act,
Writing,
the writing of the dialogue, the writing of the scenes themselves, right? I don't think this portrayal is her fault either. So I don't want people to come at me and like say that either. But what I do not like is that in the game, yes, she's hell bent on revenge, whatever, right? And she's brutal in nature. But it's like that's also because Joel also taught her, because he came from a place of revenge and hurt after his daughter died. He just shut off emotion for the longest time until he got to Jackson, right? when Ellie was going through her puberty and her most impressionable years, like that's who she was trekking across the United States with, right? This hardened soul who gave no fucks and was just trying to survive, and that meant killing people, and
with no remorse, no
with no
second
remorse,
thought.
and just trying to get through another day, right? Um, and so Ellie has that, but also at the same time she does have this moral compass that she also did learn from the softened, more aged Joel, right? Who also realizes too, like, I wanna have a place of belong. I wanna fit in. I have this new love interest in Dina. She makes me feel some type of way. Maybe there's more to life than this. I mean, there's so much conflict in her, but at the same time, you see a little, or you not a little girl, because in this one she's older, but you see a young woman who like literally has like so much doubt in her mind about her purpose, why she got to live. She's got this great gift of being immune, but can't even use it. And at the same time, questions whether she should be alive or not. And, you know, she's also like trying to do right by that, but she can't also let this loved one go without acting on revenge because she knows that Joel would do this for her. So it's just conflict, dude. In every aspect of the game, you see it. You see it in the facial animations, you see it in the combat, you hear it with the dialogue in the cutscenes and the NPCs. And it's like the other thing is like this Ellie in the game, although there might be brief moments where she is in horror and she is just trying to survive, oftentimes she's not freaking scared, dude. She's going at full on squadrons of military trained personnel. She's going at multiple infected, five, six more at a time. Like she's brave. And in this game, like, or in this adaptation of the character, dude, she's literally just scared. She's got like a pistol and she uses it as like a last resort, and the way that she uses it doesn't seem very efficient.
Well, and I think it's one of the reasons it was such a big letdown too, is like we talked about earlier in the episode. Watching her and Dina deal with the clickers, like you said, it's almost in a joking manner. They're like, "Yeah, we've done this 100 times. This is a cakewalk," and by the time they get to Seattle, that's gone.
Right.
And you're like, "You guys are hardened badasses now, hell bent on revenge." Where did all that go from the first episode?
And it's also like you could argue like in the scenes, like especially because like she gets bit too. It's like they things almost don't go well because they were fucking off. So you can say, oh, well, they weren't really locked in because they're so used to doing this. That's why it was kind of sloppy killing. But at the same time, it's like you would expect by seeing that and then realizing like, oh shit, like we almost like really messed up today. If we would have been on our A game, like, this could have been easier for us. You would think that if they were going out to venture in Seattle where they knew there were bigger threats, that they would have their game faces on, as cliche as that sounds. Like they would be prepared. You see Dina, she's like, okay, we're gonna take this trail because it's safer and because we have pit stops along the way and there's gonna be less encampments. Like she's very tactical when it comes to planning their route and their travel to Seattle and when they get there. But it's like all of that goes out the window when there's any type of combat or encounter. And that blows my mind.
Because it's just not done that way.
It's just not done that way. I mean, even Jesse, you see him, he's like, yeah, we set up a 2 mile perimeter, and I went this way, and Tommy went this way, and he's got his rifle, and he's carrying it like like with safety protocols, and it's like he seems like a trained individual. And they talk about Ellie being one of the best when she's in Jackson. So why would she not portray at least some of that, especially when she's out venturing, on her own?
Well, especially considering in the stalker scene with two of them on that level, maybe a smidge below Jesse,
Yeah,
they can't even deal with almost one.
right,
He comes in and takes out the whole thing like it's nothing. And you're like, okay, this doesn't add up.
right.
And then one of my biggest gripes of the whole season, and I saved this one, they fucked up the whole story on who left Jackson first.
Yeah.
Tommy did.
Yeah. Tommy leaves, they go out there to find and help, and then you don't really see
But
you I
listen,
mean
that is such a, in my opinion, botched plot point.
yeah.
And the reason I say that is think about the weight. Tommy, Tommy and Joel survived together,
Yep.
raiding and like being horrible
Being
human
fireflies.
beings
Yeah.
for for a long time,
Hmm.
and then eventually split. And Tommy went to Jackson, and Joel went his way with Tess,
Yep.
and we know how that went.
Yep.
But the fact of the matter that you didn't even kind of see that get relit in Tommy, especially after you added this awesome scene where he 1v1s a bloater.
Right. Epic.
And then he just sits on his hands, doesn't say anything, and he's like, yeah, I'll help you sneak out. Or I just won't say anything. He doesn't even help.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, in the game, Tommy goes first.
Yeah.
And think about the weight that that would have had with, hey, he's got a family, he's one of the leaders in Jackson. It's like, nope, fuck this. They killed my brother. I'm going after them. I don't care what he did.
Right.
And then spurring Ellie and Dina and Jesse and like creating more of a,
In the game, I don't think
I
he
don't
has a
want to,
kid yet. I think she's pregnant. I think he didn't. But either
but
way,
still,
whatever, right?
that's a big, regardless, that's a huge risk to take.
Right.
And the fact that he's just like in the background and then it's, oh yeah, like now we're going to go help because they're going to get themselves killed. It's
Yeah.
just not accurate. And it's feeding into the whole, oh, Ellie and Dina aren't equipped to do this, even though they are.
Right. And like the way Jesse's
It's like,
introduced in Seattle is different too. Like there's so many, and I get it. Like you don't want to do beat for beat and just do a live action adaptation, but like certain things matter because it does change the dynamics between the characters and how the story progresses.
especially when you approach it from, okay, Ellie and Dina want revenge too. And now they're going to help and make sure Tommy's okay.
Right.
Versus they go and now, hey, we got to clean up your mess. We're coming.
And also like the fact that like Ellie like tells Dina about like the encounter, at the hospital. It's like none of that happened. So Dina's always Team Ellie. Like Dina's always Team Ellie. In fact, until like the epilogue, right? So, that kind of aggravates me. And then it's like again, and it sounds like a broken record, but like the whole revenge thing, like you were talking about earlier, like when she kills, when Ellie kills Mel and Owen, both are on purpose, and like Owen is a dick in that scene. Obviously, kind of like this, but like it's worse. And then like Mel, like no, Ellie like straight up kills. It's not like oh she accidentally killed her, and then like once she finds out she's pregnant, she's like shit, and she thinks about Dina, and you kind of see that, whatever. But like there's no like get the baby out of me shit. I don't know, like there's just things that I'm like why? Why did we have to do that?
It, and I understand a good, like, I understand a big portion of it of trying to humanize the
Sure.
characters. But at the
Especially the
same
bad guys,
time,
quote unquote, when you're going to set up the next season for the leader of that team to be your protagonist. I get it.
well, and I think where you lose me in a couple of ways is like in the game and in the story, like with on HBO, they have little like 10-minute snippets about the making of the episodes, and they
Right.
discuss, the background, why they make certain choices and stuff like that. And something they constantly allude to every episode is, hey, like Abby and Ellie are supposed to be mirror images of each other,
Yep.
just on different paths at different points.
Yep.
And I think the thing that you actually, for me, lose is they don't feel like mirror images of each other.
At all.
Like everything Abby does is intentional, vengeful, um, visceral.
Yep.
Like, and Ellie's supposed to be doing the same thing and it never happens. And you're kind of like, where was this?
Like the only difference is like, you know, Abby has this whole military presence behind her and allies, right? Ellie has her group, but it's like ragtag survivors. And it's kind of like, you know what it reminded me of? When I played the games, it reminded me of like Rocky 4 where really even the first one with Apollo Creed, right? Where Rocky is like just as driven and just as powerful as Apollo Creed, but he's like training with logs and in a shitty gym and whatever, right? But he still gets the job done. And Apollo Creed, it's like he earned the title, but he's got like the most elite training facility. He's got the best of the best trainers. It's like they are the same person, but it's like one was molded out of poverty and one, you know,
Well, it's
had
also the difference of like talent and like resources versus grit and resources.
exactly.
And
And it,
something I think that separates like Jackson versus the WLF, in my opinion,
yeah,
is like with Jackson, you can tell that's a group that primarily deals with the infected.
they do,
While the
and not
WLF, you get more of the like the human versus human interaction. And it also changes the dynamic of like, in my opinion, and this goes both
yeah,
ways. Like when you look at the WLF, they have numbers on their side.
yeah,
But in reality, it's just people in military esque garb.
yeah. They're a bunch of dumbasses, really.
While with Jackson, you have genuine hearted individuals that had to get to the middle of nowhere fighting through hordes of infected to create that community.
Right.
So
And they
like it
also
is a
know,
harder.
yeah, and they also know that like they have to be on top of their game because they will not survive because they do not have the numbers. The WLF are like, yeah, we've got tanks and we got Humvees and we've got weapons. Like we're gonna be fine, so we
And
can piss
also
off.
pure environment.
Right.
You just screw up your crops in Wyoming and at Jackson, you're done.
Yep.
The weather's going to get you before the infected do. Like Seattle's a very different vibe. You have a few key players that are of that caliber, but overall everybody else is fodder.
Yep.
And I feel like they just missed the mark in my opinion
Yep. Yep.
on that aspect, and it kind of shoots it in the foot just overall because Ellie and Abby are supposed to be basically the same character,
Yep.
like, but Abby got her revenge and Ellie is in the process of getting hers.
Right.
And it honestly, for the next season, it makes me worried. Are you going to keep Abby in that motivated, that role, like, because she should be,
Yeah.
but I'm now concerned they're not going to do it, and it's going to kind of ruin what they've already set up with Abby.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure. I and the other thing is like I don't know if Abby has enough appeal with casual audiences to even carry a whole season. Because because like the game, for those of you who play the game, it's like okay, you do your first 3 days in Seattle as Ellie, and then you do 3 days of that whole time frame as Abby, and then they culminate in conflict, whatever, and then we get to see the resolution of that later on too with the epilogue and all this. Like a lot carries on, but like you're playing as Abby, and so I feel like there's going to be a lot of Abby centered episodes, and I just don't know if the viewership's already declining on episodes 6 and 7, like it did from the premiere. I don't know if they can even get a fourth season greenlit. And they said right now they cannot finish the game or the story of the game in the third season. That they're going to need a fourth. And I'm like, I don't know if that's a good idea. But what do I know? I
Well,
mean,
and the thing that we could see happen potentially is because, and I don't know, it could go either way, but you could see a pivot where it's like, hey, like these are the things people didn't like. We need to really hit hard with this season, or we might not get to finish the story.
yeah, and I hope they take the criticism well and they do that, right? Because like it still can be salvaged, right? Like I know it sounds like we've just been shitting on the show. I do think it has a lot of greatness still. I do. But like it's also one of those things where like right now it's on its teetering point and it can go up or down and it really depends on the first half of that next season, really.
And something else I want to touch on as well too is, something we didn't go get into too much yet is, listen, we've been talking about action and grittiness and that visceral feeling you get from the game.
Right.
But one of the highlight episodes of the season was episode 6, which really dove into that story element. It was beautiful getting to see, Ellie and Joel's interactions when things were going well. And also getting to actually see that porch scene sequence where they talk.
Yeah.
Because up until that point, you think that never happens. And that was so incredible to get that scene and get that moment at that time.
Yeah.
Like that episode was, in my opinion, just as good as episode 2 with the beats it hit and the way it did it. But the problem, in my opinion, was the other episodes tried too hard to do that, and that's it wasn't the time to do it.
Well, you know what's crazy about that too? Is like, yes, I think that episode is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. It's one of my favorite ones of actually the whole show, right? Also because at that point in the game, like you need that breather. You also need to see that backstory of what happened between game one and two, right? Did they still have a loving relationship? You kind of get to see like Ellie's still developing. Joel is finally like softening up and becoming the Joel you see in game two versus game one. Super cool. And just like visually, it's really cool like to see a museum in the apocalypse, like in a kid's wonder, a kid who's only heard stories about space and dinosaurs and it's like something that we take for granted just for learning about it in history books and having the internet and all of these things that we have and like oh like we've seen space and dinosaurs in 1,000 different iterations. Like she just has like had to think about it and wonder about it, right? There's no TV, like it's super cool. um but the porch scene, we actually don't get that until the end of the game. So like when they threw that in there, I was kind of shocked that it was like, oh, they did this, right? Um and again, it's been a while since I played. It's either at the very end of the game or at the end of Ellie's section, but I'm pretty sure like this is at the end of the game, right? That you get that. And I'm like, wow, they kind of pushed that in there, right? But it is also one of my favorite moments because the whole time, like you have the conflict between her and Joel. Then he dies, and so she doesn't ever get to. You're like, oh my God, they never got to resolve that. It's just been like he's loving her. They get in an argument. He dies. She never gets to have that resolution with him, and that's why she's hellbent on getting her revenge. Because I think it's her way of saying like, thank you, I'm sorry. This is how I'm gonna pay respect to you. But it's kind of one of those things where it's like, A, at the end, when you finally see it, it's beautiful that they got to have that moment. But it's also like, holy shit, she never really had to go do that because, like, she had already made peace with Joel. And it's like, she really was almost just being selfish in a way. You know what I mean?
And so, a couple things and a couple points on that.
Right.
Number one is, I think part of the reason they did it sooner is something that the show has leaned into, which I don't like, is kind of portraying Ellie in this extremely selfish, pathological liar, can't be trusted way.
Yeah, and I don't like that.
And it's not like that at all.
No.
And like you said, that's a big plot payoff, like you just said, to be like, wait, she didn't have to do any of that.
Right.
And at the same token, too, like another point you brought that was really nice is like, oh, it's a nice breather, but breather from what?
Right. Because
Like
we
I
didn't
know that
get
sounds and I know it sounds so stupid because there are a lot of big plot points that happen, but like because you don't get as much context, you get this like beautiful emotional episode and then you're expecting like a ton afterward and like you get a little again,
right.
but then it's also not done in the way you expect and then you're like
Yeah.
like those moments or just throughout the whole season, like a lot of the emotional moments don't hit as hard because it just feels like it's your main focus
Yeah.
outside of any of the other things that happen. Like it almost seemed like they take the emotional and beautiful moments, push them forward, but all the build off to make those moments pay off is just not there.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. And that was my whole point in the beginning, right? Like that's the problem. And that's why I was like, I made the comparison of like AI made content because it's like, although AI recognizes like what people are looking for, it misses some of these gaps that kind of like make things feel, well, human and also like miss the entire point of why people like the things they do. And that's why prompting, and I know I'm getting on a spiel about AI right now, and it's kind of unnecessary, but it's like that's why they say like people who can prompt and people who can't like make better AI content. It's like they took the elements, but it's like they don't understand why people fell in love with this in the first place, and it's insane to me.
It feels like a lot of it was kind of just jumbled together. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, where you lost a lot of
But again,
people.
I don't make
Because
TV shows. I don't know what goes into it. I don't know how difficult it is. It probably really is, right? But it's like I'm just upset as a fan because season one was done so well. I thought just with a bigger budget and with a great reception and viewership, I thought we were gonna have a longer episode count to really flesh out this story because it is bigger. It is a bigger story, right? I played both games and I played both games, probably 5 times a piece, maybe more on the second one because I actually, contrary to popular opinion, I think the second one's better. That's just me. Um, I thought they were going to be able to really do it justice, and it just like I'm so bummed with the final product, man.
and kind of the last thought I just want to nail on my end is just, going through season one, genuinely like absolutely loved it. Couldn't wait week to week to put it on, and just it was a genuine pleasure. And like I was so excited for season two.
Yeah.
We get season two. It's an incredible start out the gate. I'm invested. And then kind of just slowly but surely was like, okay, that was kind of weird. All right, didn't love that. All right. And by the time the season ends, when you get hit a season finale, it's not exactly like you expect a payoff. We knew that it was going to end on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, for sure.
But when you get there, it doesn't even feel like the season should have ended. But on top of that, you're almost like, do I even want, like, I don't want to say, do I even want to watch the next season? But like, you're kind of so like bummed and irritated that you're like, I don't like it. All right, it is what it is.
And
Like, you're,
it was also, yeah. It was also weird that they did like a cliffhanger and then they like showed the very beginning of Abby's missions as like day one, and then it shows Abby like looking over the WLF compound. Because like when you take over at playing as her, like that's how it starts. You like wake up and you go through some shit, and then you step out and you're like walking through the facility, and it's like, why wouldn't you just wait? That little 2 minute scene could have been done as like episode one of the next season. I don't know. It just kind of was like it was weird editing. I don't know. I didn't like it. Um, it's also kind of weird. Today the FBI has a Twitter account. I don't know if you guys know that. Whatever, an X account, whatever you call it these days. And the Cash Patel, the head of the FBI, was like, "Oh yeah, we just stopped a Chinese terrorist from releasing this uh pathogen that through a fungus. It was like a wheat and something fungus, right? That like it was extremely dangerous, and it's like in the first season we see that like the cordyceps, which is a fungus, is transmitted through like wheat and flour, and it's kind of like either that was really great marketing or we're cooked. You know what I mean? Like it was just wild. I was like, oh my God, I'm about to do a breakdown on The Last of Us season two, and he tweets this like hours before I was gonna do that. I was like, the world is too weird right now. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. Like it was mind blowing to me and scary.
100%. But yeah, I
And,
mean,
and that's another thing too. Sorry, not to cut you off, but like just like again going back to like the cordyceps, one thing I was really excited about for the show versus the game is like we got a lot more backstory on the fungus itself and kind of how it's spread, and now we also seeing like it's evolving. We see it in the water lines, we see that it's transmitted through the air. It's like there were spores in the game, but it was like you could see the spores. People kind of knew where to stay away from, like whatever. And this in the show, it kind of like showed that it was evolving, and then it might take form in a way that we hadn't seen in the game. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like change the way that the infection is transmitted, and like that's cool. And like the levels of the infected, dude, we haven't gotten like any of that. We've gotten no explanation on that since episode like two in Jackson when it was like finally moving through the water line.
it just kind of was there.
It's just yeah.
I will say the spores thing was pretty crazy. Like that was wild to see on screen.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
thought that was done really cool.
It was done well. They did a good job. Visual effects and stuff was really cool. But like, I don't know, man. I don't know.
And
It's just
I'm
like wild to me how it's like they're missing the point.
I'm hoping that from Abby's perspective, even if it's contextual, I would like to see you know, aftermath of what Ellie and Dina did in Seattle, something that alludes to what we kind of missed,
Yeah.
as well as really highlighting some epic moments from Abby. I think that's where they can really pull this together, and show like, hey, this is what actually happened. This is why Abby went after them, like, and really show like kind of the build up to that encounter that the season ends with.
Yeah.
If they do that right, it could really like come together and be good. And it's like, hey, maybe there's some things we missed, but they tied it back together, like the porch sequence in episode 6. And
Well,
like if they can find a way to do that, I think we can see something pretty cool.
and see, for me, I was thinking about it. I was like, okay, if I had to do this and I had to break it up, to two parts or maybe three, depending on like how would I do it? And for me, I would have actually left out the flashback scene and porch scene of episode 6, even though it was one of my favorite of this season. And when we had Abby in her season in season 3, I would have stuck that episode into there to break up kind of the Abby gameplay segments to show people, hey, remember those people we were following for 2 seasons? Like, this was a really important moment. They're still important to the story. Don't forget them. Also, like, there is there is light at the end of this. They did get to resolve their conflict and then get people excited for that final fourth season and then show kind of the Ellie Abby conflict finally resolving and kind of the end of the story and the epilogue. And I don't know. I think you still have to remember, like, as cool as Abby is as a character in the game, people are watching this for the Joel and Ellie's story, and I don't know really by like based on playing the games where you're gonna fit them into the next season.
Well, what I could see working, which would make sense based on some of the backtracking in this season,
Yeah,
is if throughout the next season, if you're kind of going back and forth and you're showing those crazy Ellie sequences that we missed from this season mixed in with Abby's
that'd be
perspective
cool.
as well.
That'd be cool.
Like if that's the route that I wouldn't be surprised if that's the route they're going. And then in that case, everything we say is nonsense. But at the same time, it's a big risk to take.
So you're saying like, yeah, that'd be cool. Like, so, we see Ellie kind of move through Seattle. We see all the key points. We see her like at point A and then point B, but we don't see the in between and how she got there and the conflicts. But we get that in between the Abby storyline progression. I think
To
that would
show
be
like,
absolutely epic.
because obviously we know Abby can track, we know she can do that. Well, what is she tracking? You know what I mean? Like
Right.
based off of what we see Ellie and Dina do, there's not really any room for her to find them.
Right. No, that's yeah.
So there could be the potential that maybe she's coming upon these moments where there are tons of dead WLF, and then you get a flashback sequence to Ellie taking them out.
Damn, that'd be
And you
cold,
see those
dude.
moments, like because in my mind, and granted, like I don't know it nearly as well as you do,
Right.
but I feel like an entire season of just Abby, as cool as it would be, I just don't think it's going to work as well.
Yeah, that's
And
what I
I
was
also
saying
feel like
earlier. I was
there's,
like,
I also just feel like there's not quite as much to dive into,
right,
which like there is, but there isn't to the same degree.
right.
So like if you really want to like knock the next season out of the park, you're including those epic Ellie moments to show like how Abby's tracking them to tie in and show also, like I mentioned before, if they're true parallels of one another, you're showing like a crazy Abby sequence, a crazy Ellie sequence, and you're showing them and their evolution from Abby got her revenge and what has it changed, and Ellie's on the road to her revenge.
That'd be cool. That'd be cool.
Because we do know in the game, once Abby kills Joel, it doesn't make her feel any better at
No,
all.
no. Yeah, no, I think that would be epic. I think you just kind of like I'm just having this like come to Jesus moment. It's like, oh yeah, they could do that. Like that would be cool. Like they could totally do
To be
that.
honest, it came to me as we were talking about it because I was like, wait a second. They kind of did a lot of like just the way they did episode 6 with the flashbacks and tying in something from earlier in the season that like when you watch like Ellie just walk past Joel, like it just breaks your heart.
Yeah.
And then you get that like payoff to a degree. I'm like, wait a second.
You could do
They
that.
could be going that route where they're
Yeah.
going back and showing those moments that we didn't get in season two.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because let's
I
also be real, for me and you, we assumed this was going to be a 2 season show.
I thought so for sure. I thought it was gonna be Ellie's story, then Abby's story, but like more drawn out, right? And you know what? If they do it the way you're talking about, which look, if we come back to this in a year from now when it releases and you're correct, dude, like I'm gonna owe you some serious praise. But like I think the other thing is, we've talked about the brutality and the combat and all that stuff and the lack thereof. I think the other reason that the expectation was there, not only because of the gameplay, right, and that being pivotal, but because episode two was such a banger, I was like, you cannot give me that much action and set piece
And then not really
and
have it
then never
again.
do it again. Like, how? How do you do that to somebody? Like,
And, at the end of the day, too, if, like we see it with animated shows a lot where, you'll be watching a season and be like, oh man, like the animation doesn't quite look as good. There was kind of a lot of story beats, but not a lot of action. And they're like saving it for the end.
right.
I kind of get the vibe, and I'm not saying this is the case. I don't know, but I feel like that's episode two had so much packed into it, as well as like they were in a frozen blizzard filming that.
Yeah.
Like there was so much that they packed in, including an entire crazy epic sequence that wasn't even in the game. That like they didn't have the budget to actually do the action they not necessarily should have, but would have.
Yeah.
And maybe now that you're going to like a more smaller encounter, like intimate, gritty encounter type environment, that you can do a lot more of that in the next season.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And
also,
it'd also be cool is like, hell, and now you've got my brain spinning. You could literally go do season three, have it be Abby's story, have her have some time jumps, do the action set pieces with Ellie, then in season four, you show Abby's, and you could even show one episode in season three. You show Abby's encounters, and then you also show like what's going on in Jackson, to break that up, right? And it's maybe a little more intimate there because like you see a bunch of people die and get hurt and whatever, and you're like also like there's a chance that now that we've used all our defenses, like we're vulnerable, right? Could we see an attack, right? Like another attack? Could we see more? Just like I don't know,
like a
man. That's
attack by raiders or
yeah,
something
I
like
kind of
that.
like this broken up long form narrative, almost like the MCU. It's like at first you're like, okay, there's this post credit scene and there's these characters and like in the next four movies we don't get any payoff, but like in the grand scheme of things when you look 10 years down the road you're like, "Oh my God, they paid it." You know what I mean? Like I kind of like that. That's cool playing chess not checkers, like super cool.
And I wouldn't be surprised if, season three is kind of that like all out war, showing both sets of encounters, giving you backstory to Abby, maybe the Rat King,
Rat King would be dope.
because that also adds a lot of context to Abby. And then at the same token, you create that epic action sequence for her.
Yep.
And then peppered in throughout in different episodes, you're showing Ellie progress through Seattle and like just quick action sequences, kind of like the game with the quick encounters.
Yeah.
And then, your season four is like your true, like, hey, what's the resolution of all these conflicts? What actually happens? Fleshing it all out.
Yeah. Yeah.
That like from where we're at now, that's kind of how I would like to see it, to kind of go, okay, I understand the decisions, it all made sense, this worked. Like that's just kind of my thoughts.
One thing too that I know we've been kind of going on for a minute, and we got to wrap up. But another thing, gameplay element, I feel like was really cool. That we didn't really see. We see glimpses, like small glimpses. But so in the game, you find like supplements to level up your attributes. You find like items to like remodel your weaponry and put modifications on your weaponry. But you also find things to like you find like two or three ingredients to make different items too, like Molotov cocktails and med kits and all these things. And it's like I don't expect them to like video gameify real life, but it's like I would like a whole episode where like they're going through hell, right? And as they're fighting, they're also searching for things to repair themselves or just get themselves back to their home base of operations, whether it's the theater or the WLF base or whatever. Like, I think that'd be really cool. Like, seeing this scavenging, like, oh my gosh, like I'm a survivor, attributes really come out in the characters. Because it's like, if you
Like in a
show
crazy encounter, finding some things to put together a quick Molotov cocktail to cover your escape, or
the
like just something
MacGyver
to,
effect, yeah, like,
yeah,
And so it's
I,
like because that also like separates it from just being like nonsensical action with no stakes where they just keep getting lucky and getting away. Where it's like, oh no, they had to work to get through this. You know what I mean?
yeah, that I will admit that would be something I'd like to see a little more of.
Yeah.
Kind of the ingenuity, the creativity, the hey, like I'm out of bullets. I just took out the Seraphites. There's plenty of arrows here.
Right.
That was something I was shocked we never saw from Ellie either. We
Right.
never saw the bow.
Crazy. Crazy to me.
So that's why I feel like they got to show some of that. It's
Yeah.
got to come in the next season. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. Just my thought.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool, brother. Well, is there anything else you want to touch on regarding the show?
Mainly, the main thing I want to add is I know for a lot of listeners that just sounded like a rant that we absolutely hate the season. That is not the case. Like, there's a lot of moments we both adored and loved.
Yeah.
And I think it's just there's a few things that just kind of bummed us out at the end of the day. But kind of after this wrap up here, like, I think there's a lot of cool directions they could take the show that would really like nail this and make it awesome. So, I'm hopeful and listen, I'm still excited for the next season. I'm just curious to see how they pull it off.
Yeah, it's crazy because like I'm actually way more optimistic about the future of the franchise now after talking to you versus like
Yeah,
when I was like prepping for this. It's like, damn it, like, this is one of my favorite PlayStation franchises. I'm a huge PlayStation fanboy, right? They got all the exclusives. Um, and I was like, man, I have to go like shit on a series or like a company that I really like, right? Like Naughty Dog crushes, and it's like, wait, we could be back. We could be back.
yeah. It might be a little more of a long burn than we expected, which might make sense. Maybe the rushing, maybe there was a reason to it.
Yeah. We'll never know. We won't know until they conclude the show. So, overall, I think I brought up everything that I really was wanting to
Same.
to talk about. Um, Overall, though, I would say if I had to rate each season individually, like I'm giving season one like an 8.5, 9. I really just like I really wouldn't have changed hardly anything, and I'd give this one like an overall like a 7. Like I like it. I'd watch. In fact, I want to rewatch each episode consecutively to see if maybe it's better than I remember. Um, and see how it flows as one like long form movie. Uh, but I still think overall like fondness and as far as like perfectly executed, I would have to put it on like a 7 out of 10. So
Honestly, I agree. I was going to say season one, I put it a solid 9, possibly 9.2, a little bit
okay,
higher.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I would put season two at like a 7.
yeah,
Like there was enough really, really good and great moments, but there was enough moments I really didn't love that like it kind of is like I would definitely watch again, would like to do the same deal, but I can't put it higher than 7.
yeah. Yeah. Uh, it's funny. I'm sitting here thinking about PlayStation IPs and television shows and stuff now, and I don't know if you remember, but Amazon Prime greenlit a God of War TV adaptation for the Norse saga. And I'm like, oh God, how bad could they butcher that? Like, I really hope it like goes well, right? I'm over here like freaking out
Listen,
about another beloved franchise.
I would lose my mind if they butcher that because you know how much I love God of War.
Yeah, and it's like, God of War. It was so beloved when our childhood, and then like people kind of forgot about it and kind of like, oh yeah, that was just like a bunch of gory games and like nonsense. It's real immature fun.
It was a button
It,
masher. It
it
was
was
a
a
button
button
masher.
masher, right? And then like they just took the mythos made you fall in love with who Kratos was and now who he became and the journey. And it's like that could be an epic TV show, but it like as we see here, it's like they basically had a scene for scene outline to just follow in live action, and they didn't, and it's causing a lot of controversy. And I'm like, don't ruin God of War. But all right. Well, for me, um, that's all I got, brother.
Yeah, I don't really have anything else I want to touch on.
Cool. Well then, as always,
Stay nerdy, everyone.
stay nerdy.